everybody. Welcome to Homeschool Minnesota. I'm super excited today that you guys are with us. This podcast is an outreach of Minnesota Association of Christian Home Educators, MACHE. We're so glad that you're here today. Well, here we are. Did we ever think we would make it to the end of our self-care series? Here we are. We're in the 7th episode, final episode for biblical self-care. And we just want to thank those of you who have listened to each and every episode and have sent us such sweet encouragement and feedback. It really does help because Mellany and I were talking before this podcast and we were talking about how and praying and just thanking God that as we were doing this series, that God was challenging us with this series as well. We were walking out every single episode that we talked about. Trust me when I tell you that week we dealt with it and that it was just unbelievable. And so, we're just thankful that God is gracious and he is merciful and he brought us here. And so for those of you who have listened, thank you so much. And we just keep wanting to hear from you. If there's anything that you want us to pray for you about, please let us know. Of course, in the description of this podcast always is a way to contact us. We're grateful that it has blessed you as much as it has blessed us. And today we are talking about one of my favorite topics. No, the word that protects your self-care. It doesn't do any good to do all this work and making sure that you're practicing good biblical self-care only to have it undone by not putting down good boundaries. And so we're going to talk about that. Ladies, this is for you because moms, women, wives in general are really not good with the word no. It just is something that I have struggled with. And we're going to talk about it today. So first, let me introduce Mellany. She's here again, and we've grown to really love Mellany. We're going to keep her forever. We're so thankful she's here in Minnesota with us. But first, Mellany, can you just give us a recap of everything that we've talked about so far?
So this is going to be brief. So if you want more in depth, just go back and listen to these episodes. In the first 3 episodes, we laid the foundation for self-care. We talked about why it's needed, boundaries to overcome, and then consequences of what happens without it. And then in the next 3 episodes, so 4 through 6 in the series, we talked about the practical application of self-care. And that included being cleansed by Jesus, restoring our relationships through forgiveness, and then the external rhythms and activities that restore us and make us shine. And then the theme that has been consistent through everything else is our foundation is Jesus, and he is the source of our self-care. And we are a masterpiece of his creation, and we need to be cared for.
Yeah, so good. It's so good. And we're going to talk about boundaries today. I have a little illustration just for you to keep in mind as we're talking about this, because I know that it's a challenge for me to hear about boundaries sometimes. So a while ago, and I don't remember where I heard this, and I'm sure others of you have heard this too, but it is not my original idea, okay? But there was a study that was done, and it's not an idea, it was actually a study that was done. I want to say it was on Focus on the Family. Dr. James Dobson talked about it way back, where they had a playground, a beautiful playground with all these swings and monkey bars and slides and wonderful things that kids could and they just released this classroom full of kids onto the playground, said you can play anywhere you want to play. There's trees around, there's all these things, play anywhere you want to play. And the kids stuck to the playground equipment. I mean, very few of them, like a few of them would wander near a tree, then they'd run back to the playground equipment. And they just they all played on there. And then the next week they brought the kids back to the same playground. But what they had done is they had put a fence around it, a perimeter around it. And they said, you can play anywhere. And the kids were climbing the fence, running to the trees, playing chase around the thing. There was all of a sudden they were just free to be whatever they wanted to be, do whatever they wanted to do. There was safety, there was security. They felt more secure and able to just enjoy the playground, the whole playground. And it was because of the boundary that was already, they knew clearly where their boundary was. So let's keep that in mind as we talk through boundaries. So many times we look at no as being a bad thing. So Mellany, can you explain to us what Jesus thinks about the word no?
Yeah. And as always, I have a story to illustrate. So this one's pretty recent. It's just from the last winter season here in Minnesota. We get a long winter season. And it was during the season of Advent. And in the area of the state where I live, they always have a live nativity scene. And really good friends of ours were volunteering to be a part of this live nativity. and invited us and said, hey, would your family like to volunteer with us? And that's when I did an internal check and found that my answer was a screaming no. I mentally started to take stock of my week. We had meetings and Bible study and guests coming and a homeschool field trip, and our children were going to sing at church that weekend. Not to mention, we're still home educating every single day of that week. Now, all of these are choices. So we have to take responsibility for our choices, but I had already said yes to so many things that when something else came in, there just wasn't room. So the answer had to be no. Now, author and businessman Harvey Mackay has said, one of the greatest truths in life is that no is a complete sentence. Yes. Now, I've also heard that no is simply the opposite of yes. So when we think about the word no, I think in our culture, it's gotten a really bad rap. Now, perhaps this is because, and Dale and I were talking about this before we started, none of us like to hear when somebody tells us no. But perhaps,
so true.
Perhaps it's also because our culture is constantly telling us to say yes to ourselves, or you can have it your way. We've talked about that in some other episodes. And so that might also be a reason why no gets a bad rap. So as always, what does the Bible say? So we're going to look at a bunch of verses here. Just pull up your pants and hold on tight. Matthew 5:37 says this, simply let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So when we look at just this verse, it doesn't say that no is bad. It states, make your choice. Either choose yes or choose no, and then stand by it. So now there's actually, as I got into this, a lot of examples in the Bible that encourage us to say no. So there's so many that I'm just gonna list the address. And so circle back with a pen and pencil if you want to circle back to these scriptures to look them up for yourself. And I'd encourage you to do so. But I'm just going to fire through them just in terms of time for this podcast. So 1 Corinthians 10:13 encourages us to say no to temptation. 2 Timothy 1:7 and many others say no to fear. Philippians 4:8 say no to bad thoughts. Proverbs 3:5 and 6 say no to self-reliance. 1 Peter 5:7 say no to anxiety. Matthew 6:33 say no to anything that comes before the Lord. Ephesians 4:29 say no to corrupt talk. Romans 12:2 say no to being conformed to the world. And we could just keep going. When we look at scriptures that tell us to be thankful in everything, it's also essentially telling us to say no to grumbling, to say no to ingratitude. So no is not bad. It's simply the opposite of yes, and it can be used for good. So as we'll keep diving in here, no is really the word that will protect your self-care.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, if you say yes to everything, then your yes means nothing. You know, that's what I've always kind of thought is like, you know, then when somebody approaches you with something and you're always saying yes, it's like there's no weightiness to it, you know? You talk about no giving us margin. How does using no give us margin? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So in that example that I shared about that live nativity volunteer opportunity, because we'd already said yes to so many things, when that came along, there was just zero margin for it. And it was not only was it a good thing, it was actually something we'd really be interested in doing, something I think would be really impactful for our family to do. And frankly, probably something that was better than some of the other things we'd already said yes to. So I have learned that unless I say no, then my time will be taken with either the needs or desires of those around me or with the opportunities that present themselves first. So this idea of the living nativity for our family, it was really great. If I had said more no's during that season, then we would have had the margin to say yes when it came up. So I actually wrote a blog about this same title. And Kim put in the comments section something that I thought was really great. So I'm going to share what she said. She said this: saying no creates margin, something I have learned the hard way. No margin makes me crazy, and those around me in the trail of crazy.
Yeah.
Not saying yes immediately also allows me to evaluate whether or not the Lord really wants me to be doing the opportunity presented. It might all be really good, but not all beneficial for that particular season. Giving time before answering, if my answer is yes, it's yes, and I can rest in that. If it's no, it's no, and I can rest in that. So Kim gave me permission to share that with you all, and I thought she's provided such great insight that I hadn't even thought about. Not only does no create margin, yet when we delay our response about an opportunity, simply by saying something like, let me get back to you with an answer tomorrow, then that gives us the chance to take that opportunity to the Lord, seek Him about His desire for how we spend our time, get on the same page with our spouse for how we spend our time. And then if the answer is no, like Kim said, we can rest in that. And if it's yes, then we can rest in that. And that is how saying no can help us to have some margin in our lives.
Yeah. I think that's so important. And I know, like my husband and I, one thing that we do regularly is we go through our calendars together, our schedules, to kind of see where we're at and how are you doing on this and how are you doing on that. He holds me accountable to when I'm taking on too much. And I'll say to him, gosh, honey, it seems like you're very busy that week. Do you really need to say yes to this? Or is this something, is there, and I think that it's really, really important for us to remind ourselves that God didn't create us to work, 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 and do. Even good things that we enjoy. He wants us to have quiet time. How do we get in our relationship with our families if we're running constantly?
Yes.
How do we build relationship with others? How do we keep our solid relationship in Him if we're always going on to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing? And then when things do present themselves, like a friend who needs to talk or needs prayer or wants to have coffee because something's going on in their life, we can't be available the way that God would want us to be, or the way that we would want to be. Or our child is struggling because we've built ourselves a schedule that is so packed that we don't have time to actually do the things that God called us to do first and foremost. So talk a little bit about planning and self-care. How does self-care why, first of all, does self-care even require planning?
Yeah. A thought based off of what you just said too is that, or when we do show up in those things that come up and we don't have the margin, we're not going to show up the way we want. Like I might show up a lot more tense or impatient, more quick to anger, or not fully listening because my mind's so full of the next thing I need to get to.
Or we haven't spent time with the Lord, and so the wisdom isn't there, the discernment isn't there, the empathy, the compassion, all of that isn't there because we just have been rushing through our quiet times and rushing through our everything that we've been doing because we've had too much going on.
Right. Yeah. And so that's why self-care requires planning.
Exactly.
Yeah, in the previous episodes, we've really talked about how self-care is not just necessary, but it's a priority. And based off of what you just said there, Dale. And we've also talked about how we also have a very real enemy named Satan, who would like nothing more than for us to be completely dilapidated. He wants us to be run down, like we just said, snapping at others and not displaying the love of Christ or the fruits of the Spirit. So when I say fruits of the Spirit, what that is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Don't we all want to respond like that? And not only are these fruits of the Lord, they bring Him glory and they bless us when we act that way, and they bless those who are the recipients of it. And so when we're rested and restored in the Lord, like you just said, Dale, then we bear these fruits. And Satan, again, certainly doesn't want that. Therefore, it's a priority, and we have to be intentional with it and ensure that we're being good stewards of our time. And so the Bible also talks about planning and quite a bit. So here's a few verses from Proverbs. 21:5 says, "The plans of the diligent certainly lead to advantage." And 16:3, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed." If you want to learn about planning, read Proverbs. Then there's
Exactly.
then, then there's these other verses that talk about using our days wisely. Psalm 90:12 says, "Teach us to number our days so that we may get a heart of wisdom." And Ephesians 5:15, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil." So I'd like to share another story. This is about a friend of mine. And this is when she first decided that she needed to start prioritizing and planning her self-care. Now, for her, that was to train for a triathlon. So,
Oh,
some of
I
you,
don't understand that.
I was just going to say, some of you may scoff at that.
Wow.
And if so, then go back to our last episode, What Makes You Shine, to discover what the priority would be for you. But for her, this was self-care. And at the time, she had 3 young children at home. And as she was talking to me about, well, do I sign up for this? Don't I do? My husband's for it, but I don't know. She was concerned about taking the time necessary to train properly, but she decided to do it. And so I followed up with her about a month into her training. And I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And she beamed. She was just, like we talked about in the last episode, she was shining. Even though it took planning and attention to take time for her training, when she got done with a workout, she found, and I quote, "I have so much more to give." And that's what self-care does for us. She found that when she took time for self-care by saying no to other things, that she actually had more energy for the raising of her children, the caring for her home, for the giving of herself to those she cared about the most. And frankly, when I've practiced this myself, I've learned this truth. You will have to say no to good things in order to say yes to better things. And Dale and I were actually just talking about this right before we started recording this episode. So let me repeat that. You will have to say no to good things in order to say yes to better things.
It's so true. There's a saying that I've heard in my life, and it says that the devil can't make you sin, he will make you busy. And it's so true. It's like if he can't get you to do the bad things, he's just going to keep you so busy that you're just kind of floating through life and not really being effective anywhere, including with your own relationship. And so I just remember, like, when we were on the mission field, the one thing that I learned very quickly, because it's a very much, ministry is very much, and those of you who are listening that are in ministry on the mission field, you will understand this one. It's like a black hole of good things that need to be done. And there's so many things that you can do that would be just so wonderful and so helpful. But you have to stay focused on what God has for you when you're there, and understand that he has you there for a purpose and a reason. Because if you start trying to meet everybody's needs that come at you, you start to get very burdened, very bogged down, super exhausted, and you're ineffective everywhere, and especially in the thing that you are actually there to do. And I have to remind myself that God, our life as Christians, our whole life is like a mission field. Our families, our kids, our marriages, our relationships with our friends and family, with our churches, all the things that we do, it's a mission field. It's a ministry. It's an opportunity to reflect Jesus to the world around us. And if there's one thing that is that's going to make that difficult, is if we don't know how to stay focused on what it is that God has for us first. And so reminding ourselves, we've talked about this before, reminding ourselves of our priorities. What is it that, again, what is it that makes you shine? What is it that God has put in front of you to be faithful with? And those come first. And then all these other things are wonderful things. I mean, I'm pretty sure nobody's getting, saying, well, I don't have time because I have to go do X, Y, and Z. And we're like, ooh, do you really do that? Like, are Christians allowed to do that? You know what I'm saying? It's not like anybody's doing it's always good things. Like, I got to volunteer here, or this person needs help, or And all those things are good things, but is it meant for something for you to do? It's okay that we don't have every minute of every day planned. It's a reminder that we need to practice good boundaries. So what do you need to say no to? Those are some things to think about. I don't know. I think about, like, for me, one of the things that it's hard for me to say no to family. It really is. It's hard for me to say no to family because I have adult children. It's hard to say no because I don't see them every day, right? But at the same time, me saying yes to everything that they need from me, or me saying yes to everything that they ask of me, isn't also allowing them to just be their own parent, their own adult, their own. Not that my kids are asking me beyond craziness and things like that, but I have watched moms with adult children just really be burdened by what is going on in their child's life and taking on so much of that burden instead of allowing God to work in that child's life. And sometimes us not saying no is not good for the person around us that we're trying to help. So just a thought about boundaries that, with boundaries and with the word no comes so much freedom, so much ability to just be who you are, so much security, because it's like you stay in your lane. You know who you are. You know why you're here. You know what God has called you to do. You know what He's created you to do, and you're just going with that. And that doesn't mean that we don't go outside of our comfort zone and do things, and we don't, obviously, but it's like it's easier to hear God's voice when you're tuned into it because you've taken the time to do that than it is to try to figure it out on the fly because you've not given yourself time to really get into God's word and to really hear His voice. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. What about you, Mellany?
Yeah, it's making me think of that fence around the playground that you talked about at the beginning. Maybe the stretch for the child is to try the monkey bars that day. Maybe it's to get a little bit closer to the fence, but the fence helps create that security. When we are secure in Christ, when we know, and we talked in some of the previous episodes about identity, when we know our identity is in Him and that we're a masterpiece of His creation, that we can do what He's called us to do, and we don't have to do what He's called somebody else to do. And if we have to say no to something, we can trust Him that He's going to raise up somebody to say yes to that. So, yeah, what do you need to say no to? So an example from my own life is we had some children over while their parents went on a date. So we just took the kids, we trade off. And that's a fun way. If you need to know a fun idea, that's a fun way to get some dates in. Just trade off with another family that the kids all connect with each other well. So we had them over in the morning. We had brunch. We got everything off the tables and it's all piled by the sink. And then Pete, my husband, he organized a backyard game of touch football. And so every child was involved. Everyone was excited. And yet I wasn't invited to play. I wanted to play, but I didn't speak up. So before you get too upset with my husband, just hear the rest of the story here. So I would have loved to play and they would have loved for me to play, but I didn't ask. Instead, I do what I usually do. I cleaned up. I found myself in the kitchen, not a part of the play. I finished the dishes. I wiped the counters. I rinsed the washcloths. And I mean, can you relate? And yet, why didn't I just leave all of this or ask them to wait? But why didn't I say no to the cleanup? So I had this opportunity to connect with my family and these children that we care about in a positive, powerful way through play. And that's kind of a whole nother thing, but I really think that play is like every child's love language. And I realized during my cleanup that this lack of invitation to play was really my own doing. I had misplaced my no. I said no to the important as opposed to the urgent. So after hearing no enough, people get the hint and they stop inviting. And so I regretted that day not saying no. Is that a way to say something? Not saying no to the messy kitchen. I wish I would have just said, it can wait. And instead, if I would have said, hey, can I jump in? Like my family, they would have been surprised, but they would have also been delighted. And I would have been too. So I'm learning to let go of what feels like the urgent, to say no to the urgent and spend time on the important. So as we talked about earlier, you're going to need to say no to good things so you can say yes to better things. Cleaning up the dishes is not a bad thing. Vacuuming, laundry, the things that you need to do to take care of your home and to make it a place of peace for everybody, that's a good thing. And yet, even though it feels urgent, it can wait. So my family in this situation really shined a light on this, is of the greatest value. They're of the most important. And so spending time to play with them, it would have been a great gift to them and to me. And frankly, it's a kind of self-care I all too often forget, playing.
Yeah.
And so self-care, my self-care, your self-care is of great value. As we've talked about this entire series, it's important enough to plan and prioritize. And so consider these questions. Do you need to say no to the to-do list so you can say yes to lunch with a friend? Do you need to say no to the stack of dishes so you can say yes to playing a game with your children? Do you need to say no to folding laundry so you can say yes to time with your spouse? This is a hard one. Do you need to say no to serving at church so you can say yes to a quiet walk with the Lord? And maybe it's an opposite. Do you get a ton of time with the Lord? Do you need to say no to that walk with the Lord and say yes to stretch yourself to serve at church? It can really work both ways.
It can.
So say no to good things so you can say yes to better things. Now, like all of this, we're all in process in the self-care journey. We've talked about this time and again throughout this whole series. So this takes discipline. It's not an automatic. It takes planning. And it's not easy to prioritize, and it's not easy to say no. This like learning to play the trumpet, you're going to have to practice this, especially if it's really hard for you to say no. Practice in small ways with really safe people as a good way to start. But I think you'll find it is well worth the effort. And why? Because you are a masterpiece. You are beauty. You are creativity. You are magnificent. You are original. You are made in the image of God, and you are a masterpiece of His creation. And yet masterpieces need to be cared for. So self-care is going to result in you being a better man or a better woman. And as a result, and I'm going to speak from the female perspective here, a better wife and mom and daughter and sister and friend. If you're new to this and you don't know me from anything, but I ask that you just trust me, trust Dale, try this out, prioritize and say no in order to protect your self-care.
Yeah, so good, Mellany. I was just on my phone because I was looking for this thing that I remember reading like a long time. I was trying to find it because I'm like, "Oh, this is so perfect right here." But then you said it and I didn't need to. But it was basically about, all the little handprints and all the little, little messes and all the little piles of things around your house. And you're so busy trying to keep up with all of that that you forget the most important thing is that will always be there and you can always take care of that later. But being intentional with your family, saying yes to them, saying yes to that board game, saying yes to that coloring book, saying yes to reading that story 14 times, whatever it is, or just going out and laying in the yard and looking at clouds and talking about clouds or whatever, going and picking flowers and whatever it is that, those are things that you'll never regret doing. You'll never regret. And those dishes will still be there in the morning. Nobody's going to do them for you, unless your husband's wonderful like that, which mine tends to be from time to time. He's really great about that. But, but even then it's okay. It's okay. And it's okay for you to then say, hey, hey, we just got done playing a board game. Why don't we all work together to clean up the kitchen now?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So there's ways of doing it that things don't have to be pushed aside. You're just prioritizing and you're never going to regret time that you spend with family and friends and serving others and walking with the Lord. So yeah, saying no to some things means you get to say yes to other things, which are so good. Gosh, this has been such a good series. I'm kind of sad that we're done.
I know.
What's going to challenge me now? I'm not going to say that out loud. Anyway, but I just want to take the time to thank you, Mellany, so much. You have put a lot of effort into this series and coming when I talked to you about this back in April, you were like, yeah, I think I could do that. You said yes. And it was a big yes. And I really appreciate it. And, I know that there have been a lot of people who have listened to this and it has been something that has really resonated with them. And if it has, shoot us a line, let us know. Because it's encouraging to us and it's encouraging to Mellany, who has taken so much of her summer time to do this. And in between, all the family things that you do when you're in the summer, you know how it is, people. Everybody gets it. And if you're from a place like Minnesota, you definitely get it because you only get 2.5 months of summer all year anyway. But I'm just so thankful, Mellany. I'm thankful for the fact that you said yes, but I'm thankful that not only that you seek the Lord and you don't just kind of fly. You actually plan and you seek him. And I can tell that you really take the time to really dig into what God wants you to say. And it's a ministry for you. And so I would encourage moms that are listening, dads that are listening, please go to Sanctuary of Home and subscribe so that you get her stuff, because I'm telling you, you are not going to regret it. That's how I found out about this whole topic in the first place, was I was following her self-care posts that she was doing. And I was like, you know what? This would be an excellent series in this summer. And it was. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And thank your family for letting you, your kids, for leaving you alone while you record with me. They're awesome. And and I want to thank all of you too for joining with us today. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with a friend. We appreciate your support, and don't forget to join us every Monday and Thursday for new episodes of Homeschool Minnesota. And this is a podcast outreach of Michelle. So thanks, Mellany. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much, Dale. This has been an honor, and I am just so thankful to be able to, the Lord has poured so much into me. So I'm so thankful to be able to share it now with others.
You have a wonderful ministry. I'm so excited for you. Well, okay, everybody. So join us again on Thursday. And every Monday and Thursday, we have new episodes. So just check us out. Subscribe so that you don't miss any good ones that are coming up. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.